people living under communism and socialism are slaves.
Yeah.
However, you've got the elite. If you're working for the elite, if you're the one that is following the party line and you are the elite, then you can do whatever you want. You can travel, you can buy stuff, of course under the table, but you can still buy them. It was one law for me and one law for the, just like we're seeing right now in Canada. It looks like one law for the establishment and then another law for the rest of the peasants, the people. That's communism.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Immigrants of Canada, a show that shares immigrant stories of hope, struggle, victory, and everything in between. I'm your host, Suzette Smith, and today I'm chatting with my new friend, Pastor Artur Pawlowski. Hi, Pastor Art. Thank you for being on Immigrants of Canada.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It's an honor, honestly, to have you on the show. Just before we begin, I kind of wanted to preface this interview and just let the viewers know that I actually first saw Pastor Art being featured last week, I believe. Yeah, it was the middle of March on Rebel News. And I just kind of felt after watching that segment on Rebel News that I had to reach out to him and have him on the show. So yeah, thank you again, Pastor Art, for being here. It's kind of an important subject, I think, in these times, and I think you have a lot of experience and knowledge in this area. And so to start, you are from Poland, correct?
That's right.
Okay. And so what was it like to grow up in Poland?
Wow, that's a packed question. I grew up behind the Iron Curtain. What that means is behind a no-go zone from capitalist country. That was under the boot, if you will, of the Soviets. So after the Second War, the world was kind of divided into half. It was the Americans and the Europe, England, France, kind of a zone, and then there was the Russian zone. Poland was betrayed after the Second War and was given to the Russians. So for us, war never ended. In 1945, the Russians moved to Poland, if you will, and they took over our country. Let me just give you a little bit of history.
Yes, absolutely.
When we're talking about the Second War, when we're talking about the Nazis, and then our in quote liberators, the Russians, well, that's not true. That's actually not a real history. What happened in 1939? From one side, Poland was attacked by the Germans, the Nazis, and from another side, we were attacked by the Russians. And literally, Poland was divided in half. It was conquered by the Nazis and the Stalin thugs together. And that's a history that most of the people do not know. Russians were not our friends. They didn't liberate Europe. They enslaved Europe after the collapse of the Nazis. So in 1945, when they took over Poland, they just stayed and turned our amazing, beautiful country that before the Second War was free into a gulag, if you will, under their dictatorship. So Poland, from 1945 all the way to its liberation, was under the boot of the Soviets. And I'm telling you, it was hell on earth. There was no freedom. How it feels to grow up in dictatorship? Well, you have no rights. It's what the government says works. It's what the party line says. So you have to follow the party lines. You can be arrested at any moment, any time. Usually they would come in the middle of the night. They would break the doors and they would arrest an individual for nothing. You couldn't defend yourself. The courts were corrupted. The courts were controlled by the Soviets. So even though there was a trial, in quote, it was not a trial. It was not the real deal. It was all a circus. It was a joke. It was a lie. we had constitution through all of this time, but no one followed the constitution. The courts, even if the judges were good, they were terrified and afraid that if they don't do what the party says that needs to be done, they are next. And that's exactly what happened. So everyone was terrorized. Everyone was afraid. There was no freedom. You could not listen to a European radio. If you were caught listening to a European radio, you could go to jail. But before you go to jail, you were tortured, you were arrested, you were intimidated, you would lose your job, your wife would lose job, your children would have no future. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And on top of that, economy was completely destroyed. We couldn't buy stuff. Even if you had lots of money, you could not buy necessities, like just to give you an example, once a year I would see a chocolate, and usually that was during Christmas or during my birthday. So sometimes twice a year. And just for you to understand how horrible it was, I would take the chocolate bar, and that chocolate bar would have those little bars, and I would break them and I would lick them. I would not chew on them because this was just once a year kind of a treat. And if it happens that my mom was able to buy a chocolate with the peanuts in it, then I would just lick around it and save that peanut for the next day. You couldn't buy oranges, you couldn't buy bananas, you couldn't buy anything. Everything was under the table, everything was by bribes only. You couldn't just go to a store and just do your business. You couldn't go to a city hall and just do what they were supposed to be doing for you. You had to bribe everyone. It turned a whole nation into a corrupted thieves. I mean, horrible, horrible. Growing up in a country like this where there was no future, everything was dark, everything was shadow. Even the buildings didn't have colors. Everything was gray. The clothes that people were wearing was gray. It was a huge depression, huge depression. The whole country was drinking. Imagine visiting someone in your home,
Yeah.
and the first thing that they would put on the table was a bottle of vodka. That was because we had lots of vodkas, So that was the first thing that the people would put. Boom, vodka on the table. People had no hope. That's, if I can summarize communism and socialism, it's a place where there is no hope. There's only corruption. So 50,000 communists from the party were ruling over 36 million Poles, and they ruled them by fear, terror, lying, cheating, deceiving, manipulation. There was no such a thing as free press. Everything was controlled by the state. There was nothing like you call the police and they will defend you. No. I remember this famous saying under communism by the police officers. They would say, "Give me a man and we will find something against that man." So that's my childhood. That's what I saw. And then propaganda. I mean, the level of propaganda, unbelievable. Just like we're seeing right now in our beloved Canada, the propaganda, the state bought media that are only telling you what the government wants you to hear.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. So, for example, on the 1st of May, every single year, there was a huge display of happiness, put it this way. Millions of Polish people were commanded. You had no choice. From schools, kindergarten, workplaces, they were commanded to take it to the streets in this big, massive nationwide march, the 1st of May. And we would take it to the streets, and that was very colorful. People were commanded to smile. They were commanded to be happy. And they had to march in this pride that socialism and communism is this best thing on the planet Earth. And people did, because if you didn't show up, there were repercussions. If you didn't come to that display telling the Western world how amazing your life is, then you could be arrested. Then you would face some harassment in your workplace. You could lose your job. I mean, that's communism, that's socialism. Imagine a place, Safeway or Walmart, Imagine those big stores, and you enter that store, and the only thing you can buy is vinegar
Yeah.
because everything else was stolen by the Soviets. All your resources from the government, the nationwide resources, the coal that we had, and oil, and other things, was stolen by the Soviets. And the only thing that they didn't want it was vinegar. So every store you would enter would have shelves upon shelves of vinegar. I mean, this is a very hard thing for the Canadian mind to comprehend what I'm saying,
Hmm.
because you think, well, that's a big store, and the only thing, yeah, because there was nothing else. If you wanted to buy a loaf of bread, you had to stand in those huge lineups week after week after week. I remember, from childhood, I remember constant lineups, people standing in the lineups. I remember every week I was sent by my mom to buy bread, and I had to stand in a lineup just for the one loaf of bread, hours and hours and hours. I remember coming from school, and my mom would say, "You gotta go to the lineup because they said in 3 days they're going to bring coffee." So I had to go and replace my father for a few hours, and then my mom would cook. I would go back to the house to eat, and my mom would replace me, and that would go on for 3 days to buy a 1 kilo of coffee.
Wow.
That's communism. That's socialism. That's that's the reality that people do not understand. When you look at the countries right now in the modern history, like Venezuela, one of the
Yeah.
jewels of capitalism, and look at Venezuela now.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
hell on earth. That's
Yeah.
what communism and socialism does. So yeah, it was not pretty. It was horrible, and you could not really escape. You couldn't just say, forget about it, I want to go to a different country. Everything was tight, everything was controlled. You could not travel.
Hmm.
In communism and socialism, you cannot freely travel. You cannot just go. Everything is controlled by the state. Your passports, your right to travel. You can't buy tickets. You can't buy an airplane ticket just to go. No, everything is controlled. It's the state that is telling you what you can do, when you can do it, how you're going to do it.
Hmm.
It's a total slavery. People living under communism and socialism are slaves.
Yeah.
However, you've got the elite. If you're working for the elite, if you're the one that is following the party line and you are the elite, then you can do whatever you want. You can travel, you can buy stuff, of course, under the table, but you can still buy them. It
Hmm.
was one law for me and one law for the, just like we're seeing right now in Canada. It looks like one law for the establishment and then another law for the rest of the peasants, the people. That's communism.
Wow. That's a lot of information that you just put out there. And I don't think a lot of us understand the gravity of the situation. So I kind of wanted to ask a question about the Iron Curtain itself, because I know that the Iron Curtain sort of divided the East from the West. And so while this was going on, I believe, on the East side, then on the West side of the curtain, what was happening?
Well, there was, was freedom. I mean, just crossing one street from one street to another, I'm sure you're familiar with the Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
Berlin was divided in half. So one half was under the control of the Americans and the Europe, the democratic Europe, the Western Europe, and another one was controlled by the Soviets. So literally from one side to another, here you could have a normal life. It was freedom, everything in the stores, and then just across the street was hell on earth. Nothing in the stores, enslavement, fear, terror.
Yeah.
And I grew up on the east side under the boot of the Soviets because, like I said at the beginning, Europe and America sold Poland, give up Poland into the hands of the Soviets, and that's why we end up on the other side of the Iron Curtain. You
Yeah.
know, the Berlin Wall collapses and everything goes back to norm
Right.
because when people are free, they want to work hard, they want to achieve something. And when people work hard, when they are achievers, they start inventing things, they start traveling, they start bringing new things to country, and country flourishes. And I've seen that as well. So I grew up under communist dictatorship, hell on earth, but then I also saw the opening. In 1981,
Hmm.
I remember millions of people were sick and tired of what the Soviets were doing to our beloved Poland,
Yeah.
and they took it to the streets. And I remember millions of people on the streets. And I also remember how the government responded to this. They responded with machine guns, they responded with tanks on the streets. I've seen them. They responded with a heavy hand, and they arrested tens of thousands of people. They tortured people, they shot people just because the population was sick and tired and wanted their freedom back. The
Hmm.
government, responded with a heavy, you know, heavy fist.
Yeah.
Um, but when people got enough, and that's the hope I see, when people finally have enough of this dictatorship, they don't care anymore. They just want their freedom so bad that they come to this moment in their lives: shoot me now, I don't care. I'm doing this for my children and my grandchildren. I I do not consent to what is happening to me and to my country anymore. And do what you need to do, but enough is enough, not an inch. And a year later, in 1982, Poland got its freedom. It took few more years for everything to be unfolded. But I remember in 1989, Poland, first time in history after the Second War, elected its own government democratically.
Okay.
And from there on, Poland is one of the best democracies on the planet Earth right now. And again, that's what made me really the hardship of childhood, but also to see the power of unified people, the population that said, we will not put up with this anymore. We're taking our country back. And they did. And they did. And I saw it with my own eyes. That's why I am such a strong advocate to a peaceful resistance, but on the streets. We got to take it to the streets. We got to go and take back our country. The only thing the politicians are afraid of is united front of people. When people come and say, that's it, this is our country, it's not just your country. And now we're being told that we are in this together while the politicians are getting their hefty paychecks. We are
Hmm.
in this together while they are traveling and going whatever they want, but they tell you and me, stay home.
Yeah.
They're telling me we are in this together, but yet we are starving. We don't have enough to pay for the bills, and they have everything their hearts desire. No, we're not in this together. Just like during the communism and socialism that I grew up under, we were not in this together with the elites. The elites were doing this to us. They were imprisoning people, just like they're doing right now in Canada. So I'm waiting for the time when the Canadians will say, look, what is happening. Those people are supposed to work for us, those politicians. The media is supposed to cover the story, not cook the story. They're
Right.
not they're not telling you what's happening. They are manipulating the story. They are
Mhm.
telling you what the government wants you to see, not what's really is happening. That's exactly what was happening under the Soviets. The level of propaganda, unbelievable. In Russia, there is this magazine to this day, this newspaper called Pravda. Pravda means the truth. I
Yeah.
mean, oh irony. The only thing they would be telling you is a lie after lie after lie, and yet
Yeah.
they call that lie Pravda, the truth.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we see right now in Canada, in the Western countries. We're being fed a lie after lie after lie, and we are being forced to believe that all of this lie is actually the truth. That's why they hate those types of interviews. That's why they hate us being able to be on social networks. That's why there is this heavy censorship
Yeah.
happening right now, because they don't want you to hear what's really is going on.
Hmm. Yeah. And even if they are giving some truth, it's being twisted and manipulated, which ends up being a lie, anyways, because it's not the truth. It's either the truth or it isn't.
That's right.
So I got a couple questions here. First of all, I wanted to ask, you know the analogy of a frog being put in a pot of water, and at first it's like cold and they can withstand it, but as you slowly turn the temperature up, the frog ends up dying because the water starts to boil and it doesn't notice the temperature change. So was that actually what happened, or did people understand once that they were east of the Iron Curtain, like, oh no, we're in a communist regime?
In Poland, the case was brutal. When the Russians again liberated Poland and Europe, they just kept their soldiers there, and the Polish people were under their boots. So it was brutal. It
Okay.
was taken over. My country was taken over by violence, by dictatorship.
Okay.
However, in different countries, it was creeping in slowly,
Yeah.
and people didn't realize. And I think that's exactly what is happening to Canada and other Western countries. The socialism and communism is creeping in slowly through educational system, through the media, and through the political arena. If you look at our prime minister right now, Justin Trudeau, years before, his father started this friendship with Fidel Castro,
Hmm.
with Communist Party. And then the son, Justin Trudeau, that is now Prime Minister of Canada, he said it, that he has a huge admiration for the Chinese government
Yeah.
because of its dictatorship. He
Yeah.
also said that the worst part of Canadian society is evangelical Christians. He hates Christians. Why? Because the Christians are always the ones that will oppose any form of dictatorship. We can see what's going on, and we're very vocal about allowing people to make their own choices. So he hates it, and he says it openly that we are the worst part of Canadian society, and also that he admires Chinese government for its dictatorship. So in Canada, I see decades in the working. I think here they did everything in their power for the past 30, 40, 50 years to bring communism and socialism to this country. In
Mhm.
Poland, after the Second War, they didn't have to wait that long because Poland was destroyed by the Nazis. Polish soldiers were murdered. Millions of Poles died. So there was no more resistance from the Polish army because they were dead. So
Yeah.
the Soviets could just come in and take over. That's what happened. There was very little resistance because people were dead. You know, we've lost, I think, 10, 15 million people in the country. They were either dead or scattered all around the world. So the Soviets, when they came and liberated, again in quote, Poland, they just took over as their own playground. And they pillaged and they've stolen and they kept stealing all the way until I was born. And that's what I witnessed. I witnessed this sad, sad country that was under the boot of socialism and communism. And yet, once a year, twice a year, the whole nation was commanded to go to the streets and to show the Western countries how happy we are, how
Yeah.
amazing socialism is, and this huge display of power with the tanks and soldiers, and everyone is happy, cheering for Stalin and cheering for the communism. It was all false. It was all a lie.
Wow. And so that leads me to my next question then. I'm of the mindset personally that socialism is a prelude to communism. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I actually printed few things because I don't remember all of the definitions, um, but they are together. It's like a brother and sister. They
Okay.
work together, and they always lead to the same thing, to enslavement. So I can read some of those things that I have prepared for you.
Yes. Go ahead.
So just to start, communism was an economic political philosophy founded by Karl Marx and
Hmm.
Friedrich Engels in the second half of the 19th century. And this is an ideology that rejects God and fate. So under communism, socialism, you're not allowed to really have your faith. You only are allowed to believe in the party and the party leader. It's godless, it's wicked, it's evil, selfish. and lying to society that uses fear, terror, and propaganda to stay in power. So truth is unacceptable. They only stay in power by manipulating, by lying, by terror. In political and social science, communism is from a Latin word, common universal, is the philosophical, social, political, and economic ideology and movement whose ultimate goal is the establishment of the communist society, which everything is called a common, it has common ownership of the means of production and the absence of social classes, money, and state. However, that's not true. That's ideology, but it's not true. Like I said at the beginning, Poland was ruled by 50,000 communists and 36 million Poles were slaves. So you got classes. You got the party and party leaders, and then you got the slaves. Socialism in the most simple form is when a population collectively owns and controls the means of production and distributes the end result proportionally. In practice, the power control is delegated to the state. So there is power structure. It's us and them. And them is just few of them. While the distribution usually comes in a form of underlying social warfare to satisfy everyone's basic needs, like housing, education, and healthcare, everyone has the same, everyone is the same. So that comes to me growing up. When we went to school, everyone had to have the same uniform. So, you know, you got millions of kids going to school and everyone looks identical. You can't tell us apart. You know, it kills everything. You know, socialism says that all workers should get equal share in profit and property, while communism say that they should not be money or ownership in general, and everyone should get as much as they need and work as much as they can. Communism removes the incentive for people to work harder. They absolutely have. It also leads to resentment towards those that work less hard but receive the same. In practice, I'll tell you how that looked like. I remember this famous saying that the people had under communism: it doesn't matter if you're sitting, standing, or laying down, you will get your salary. That was this famous saying. In other words, what they were saying is, don't work hard. It's pointless. Just do your minimum and steal as much as you can, because in the end of the day, all of this is ours anyway. So what it did, it turned the entire country into thieves, not because they were bad people, but because they needed to survive. For example, just for you to understand, you're working in a manufacturing plant where you produce bulbs, right? To have light in a house. But you can't buy them because the Russians are stealing every bulb that you're producing. So in order to have a bulb for you in your house, you have to steal the one you're producing. So every day you would take in your bag 1 or 2 or 3, and then you would use the one that you need for your house, and then you would use the other ones that you've stolen to bargain with other people that are producing something else that you cannot buy because the Russians are stealing everything. So you've got this black market of things that people are producing, but they have to take it, they have to steal that in order to exchange in the black market. Because if you wanted to just use your money and go and buy the thing that you're producing, no, it was not in the market. It was a crazy concept that destroyed an entire country. Philosophy, communism, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs, right? That's a very noble statement. Free access to the articles of consumption is made possible by advances in technology that allow for superabundance. That's the philosophy. In practice, you have nothing, and you can't buy nothing. Socialism, from each according to his ability, to each according to his contribution. emphasis on profit being distributed among the society of or work phase to complement individual wages or salaries. Communism, centralized government, planned economy, dictatorship of the proletariat, which is, like I said, the elite. Common ownership of the tools of production, no private property, equality between genders and all people, international focus, usually anti-democratic with one-party system. Of course, in practice, a total disaster. Socialism, collective ownership, cooperative common ownership, economic democracy, equal opportunity, free association, industrial democracy, internationalism, material balancing. I'm laughing because this is what young people Google. And when you Google this up, you say to yourself, wow, that's awesome. That sounds
Yeah,
amazing.
it does sound great. Yeah.
However, I'm reading this to you because I found a lot of young people in Canada, they are fascinated by socialism and communism, and they are welcome in their hearts. However, it's a lie. Everything is a big fat lie.
Yeah.
Communism, a communist society is stateless, classless. Lie. I've told you 50,000 communists had everything their heart desired.
Yep.
They could travel, they could do whatever they want.
Yeah.
They were immune from the law. They could get away with the murder, if you will.
Yeah.
That was, and then the rest of us slaves.
It's a double standard. Yeah.
Double standards from the very beginning to then. And governed directly by the people. The people had absolutely no say whatsoever. Yeah. Nothing. This, however, has never been practiced. Socialism can coexist with different political systems. Most socialists advocate participatory democracy. Some social democrats advocate parliamentary democracy, and Marxists, Leninists advocate democratic centralism. Ideas, communism, all people are the same, and therefore classes make no sense. Again, they never achieved something like this because people are people. When you give people too much power, they will abuse it, they will use it for their advantage. And that's just the history of humankind. The government should own all means of production. You know what that really means? We own everything and you have no say. When the government owns everything, all means of production, they dictate, they control, and you're nothing, you're worth nothing, and they can do with you whatever they please. Land and everything else is owned by the government. Yeah. When the government owns everything, you have absolutely no drive to take care of somebody else's property. So, for example, even though people were living in the places that I grew up, in apartments, for 40, 50 years after the Second War, they did not take care of their places where they were living. Why? Because it was not there.
Right.
It was not theirs. It was not theirs. They didn't own it. It was government that owned it. And they could be kicked out from that place at any moment. Therefore, the people say, why should I paint this? Why should I fix this if I can be kicked out from this place any moment? Because I don't own it. Government owns it. So remember at the beginning, I was telling you that the country was dark and gray and depressed?
Yeah.
That was why. Because no one painted anything. It was all gray. It was all broken. When I grew up, we still had buildings with bullet holes from the Second War.
Wow.
Because no one would take care of anything. Because why would you? It's not yours. That's what communism does. That's what socialism does.
It sets like a spirit of hopelessness, basically, over the people.
That's right. Slavery, hopelessness. You have no say. You have no voice. You have no rights. It's what they say goes. It's horrible way to live. Horrible. People should work for the government, and the collective output should be redistributed equally. Again, lie. Lie. Some people had everything, others had nothing. Socialism. All individuals should have access to basic articles of consumption and public goods to allow for self-actualization. Large-scale industries are collective efforts, and thus the returns from these industries must benefit society as a whole. Again, in practice, the directors, the managers of those complex industrial, manufacturing plants, they were the kings in a castle, literally.
Yeah.
They were the kings in a castle. They had everything their heart desired, and the rest of the people were just slaves, serfs. Communism, the concept of property is negated and replaced with the concept of common ownership and usership. Socialism. There are two kinds of property: personal property, such as house and clothing, owned by the individual, and public property, which includes factories and means of production owned by the state but with worker control. In practice, never works. Communism. All class distinctions are eliminated in a society in which everyone is both the owners of the means of production and their own employees. In practice, the managers, supervisors, the directors were the kings, and the rest of the people were slaves. Socialism. Class distinctions are diminished. Status derives more from political distinctions than class distinctions. Some mobility, it's not working, it will never work, and it didn't in practice. Communism. Religion is abolished.
Mm-hmm.
All religions and metaphysics are rejected. I remember when they were teaching us that God is Stalin. Stalin was God, and I'll just give you an example. Especially in orphanages, they were practicing this type of manipulation. They would ask hundreds of kids to pray, and they would say, "Pray that God would give you candies." And the kids were praying. Kids are kids, and they would start praying. Says, "God, give us candies, give us candies, give us candies," and they would allow this to go for a while, and then they would say, "Okay, nothing happened, right? No candies, no candies. Everyone can see there's no candies. Now pray to Stalin, Diedushka Stalin. We were told that he's our grandpa Stalin, and he is like God, and he answers our prayers. So pray to Diedushka Stalin." So we did. You pray to Diedushka Stalin, and suddenly from the roof they would open a hatch and they would throw tons of candies on the kids. And the kids would say, "Wow, we prayed to Stalin and he answers. He is God." When we prayed to other God, he didn't answer, but here he does answer. So it's
That
unbelievable.
that is so unbelievable. That's incredibly manipulative and wicked.
Yeah. That's everything. Everything with communism and socialism is evil. I mean, evil to the core. The whole system is evil,
Mm-hmm.
wicked, lying. The only way you can sustain this evil system is by fear, by terror. And that's what you see in China.
Mm-hmm.
Terror. The whole nation is terrorized, and because they cannot keep this system in any other normal forms, because it's hell on earth. No one wants to live in hell.
Yeah.
So religion in communism is abolished. Engels and Vladimir Lenin, the Soviet Union's first leader, agreed that religion was a drug or spiritual booze and must be combated. To them, atheism put into practice, it meant a forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. In socialism, which right now in Canada we have a socialism.
Yeah.
That's what we have is socialism.
Yes.
Socialism allows a little bit more freedom until the full capitalism can take over. So in socialism, freedom of religion, yeah, you have it, but usually promotes secularism. Is that not what we see right now in our universities, in our schools, in our media? Is a constant attack on religion,
Yeah.
and this every Everywhere you look right now, in media, in education system, there is one thing that is being promoted over and over again. That's secularism. That we can do it ourselves. We don't need this daddy sky, from the sky. That God doesn't exist. God is dead. We are the gods. We
It's
have the power.
self-reliance. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's what you see right now actually not just now. This is going on for the past 30, 40 years. Secularization of our society it's leading us into socialism, and then socialism leads us into communism.
Right. Yeah.
So here's a few things I still have on cultural Marxism.
Okay.
Cultural Marxism is exactly what we have in Canada. So everything is relative. There is no truth. Reality is what we make of it. Smoke dope and drop out. We don't need money. Cops are violent pigs, especially the white ones.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter. Why do you think all those organizations have such a huge power? Antifa, Black Lives Matter, those are the terrorist organizations because they are being funded by socialism and communism. The same ideology. Women are smarter and better than men. All men are rapists. We don't need men. We can do it without men. Get in touch with your feelings. If it feels good, then do it. She is so empowered. You go, girl. There is no God. Let's burn the Bibles. Don't criticize Islam. Which is, I find is very funny because Islam is against women. I mean, women are treated worse in Islam than dogs. I mean, not dogs, the cows. They hate dogs. And cows are more precious than women. And still, the Black Lives Matter and Antifa, they love Islam. I don't get it. It's weird. You're a bigot, a homophobe. You're a ageist, classist pig. Think globally, act locally. Save the whales, the trees, the poor African kids. So it's outside. We have thousands of homeless people, but no one wants to move a finger to help them, but they will be advocating for some other people somewhere else.
Right, yeah.
Drop out of school and rebel against your parents. That's our scum. Moms are cool. Go vegetarian. The UFOs are coming. Don't teach kids math and reading. Don't teach history. History is useless. Don't learn from the past mistakes. And let me just add to it. If you don't learn from the past, you're going to repeat the same mistakes. If you don't know from where you're coming, you don't know where you're heading. That's just the reality.
Well, it even says this in the Bible, in the book of Ecclesiastes. It says nothing's new under the sun.
That's right. The same tactics, identical tactics are being done today like they have been done before. Nothing is new, like you said.
Yeah.
So Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, they have a number 10 essential tenets of communism. I want you to open your mind and your heart and listen to what I am about to read to you.
Right.
And in the end, when I'm done, ask yourself this question. Is that not what we're seeing in the Western countries right now? Because it's so obvious to me growing up under communism. I hope that it will become clearer for you.
Okay.
So here is what they want. Central banking system, so they can control your money. Government-controlled education, right?
Yeah.
They don't like people teaching their own kids. They don't like private schools because those schools are outside of the propaganda. Government-controlled labor. They want to control where you work and for how much you work. Government ownership of transportation and communication. Government ownership of agricultural means and factories. Everything in Canada is so highly regulated that the farmers can't say anything anymore. They can't sell it wherever they want. I mean, it's horrible. Everything is controlled by the government. When the food sources are controlled by the government, you're doomed. You're doomed. That's how they control a society, by food, by the prices, by who can raise what.
Mm-hmm.
Total abolition of private property. They hate the concept of private property. They want to take over your private property.
Yeah.
Property rights confiscation, heavy income tax on everyone. That's why you got the carbon tax, you got this tax, you got that tax. They want to tax you to death.
Yeah.
Why? Because the taxes control you. You're effectively become a slave. So now in Canada right now, we pay about 50% in taxes. If you combine all the taxes together, the income tax and the tax for fuel, tax in food, everywhere, I mean, you pay taxes everywhere.
Yeah.
Tax upon the tax upon the tax. $1 is taxed few times already. You pay at least half, 50% of your wages, you give to the beast. That's how they control you.
Mm-hmm.
Elimination of rights of inheritance. That's what they are aiming to have, that you will not be able to give it to your kids. You work hard and you want to pass your blessings to your kids, and they hate that concept. They want to eliminate that. And regional planning. They want the local governments to have the power of the local population. So you have municipal government dictators, you got provincial dictators, and then you got federal dictators.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. The implementation of all of those things I've read to you is already happening for a while in our country.
Mm-hmm. And I believe it too. I mean, I already kind of told you this little story when I first met you. You know, over the last, well, I think it would have been since summer 2019, I started to slowly wake up to what was going on actually in Canada. And I didn't like the direction that it was headed in. And for some reason, I always had this, I don't know, I just had I liked reading this book called Animal Farm. I liked it ever since I read it first in grade 9. I thought it was an amazing book, actually. And even just on a basic level, it kind of teaches you, well, it teaches you history. It's an allegory of history. Um, and so I read it again, I think in 2015 or 2016, around that time, just because I wanted to reacquaint myself with it. But then in 2019, I started sort of seeing what was going on, and I didn't really like the direction. And then when COVID hit and everything was locked down in March, I felt like my eyes were opened completely, and I thought, what's going on here? Like, this is insane. And so after that, I kind of went on a quest for truth, and I just prayed. I was like, God, show me whatever truth you need to show me. And so it was like, boom, boom, boom. I kept seeing these things, and I opened up Animal Farm again. I read it again, and this time I read it through a new lens. And it is so funny because you can see these little poor barnyard animals going through the progression from, driving out Mr. Jones, who is this, he's a dictator. Well, it was talking about, it was obviously during the Russian Revolution. So the czar, right? Driving out the czar. That's what it stood for. But you could see these animals after they drove out the big bad human. They started their own little government and economy and ran things on their own. But you could see how it progressed from socialism and how it went to full-blown communism. And it was just so funny to me how I was reading this, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can actually see the progression. And then I started to slowly connect the dots here in Canada. And so, like, everything you just read to me right now, I'm on the same wavelength as you, essentially.
What we are witnessing right now is started decades before. It's nothing new. When I came into Canada in 1995, I already noticed that this is not the country I was hearing about. This is not the country that we idolized in Poland. There's something changing in Canada. Canada was this amazing milk and honey and beautiful democracy that you could achieve and have a house and do something with your life
And
for
you
the
knew
benefit.
this in Poland, like as a as a young boy and growing up in Poland, you always saw Canada in this light.
Yes, because we've heard stories. We've heard stories of American dream. We've heard stories about freedom, that you can work hard, and if you work hard, you can achieve more. That you're free to pursue your dreams. That you are free to worship your God. You're free to just uh, just be a human
Yeah.
and not being attacked by the government that should protect you. The government that is trying everything in their power to enslave you. So we've heard about Canada, the milk and honey, this beautiful concept of a land strong and free, the North strong and free, like we have in our anthem right now. So I've heard about it. And when we emigrated to Greece, and Canadian embassy contacted us and they say, hey, you want to come to Canada? This is the country that will never persecute you for your faith. You can work hard, bring your business. We used to have a business in Greece with my father, and we sold everything we had. I mean, everything we had. We took a suitcase and we emigrated to Canada to
Mhm.
pursue our dream, a dream of freedom,
Yeah.
dream of working hard and achieving something. And then very soon I realized, oh, something is changing in this country. Something is not right. I remember this story. I'll never forget this story. We had a prime minister. His name is Christian,
Mhm.
and this guy lost a $1 billion from the Canadian coffers. And I remember the story, and the media at that time were not they were not as corrupted as they are right now. They were not working totally for the government. They were still a little bit better, and they were asking question, Mr. Christian, Prime Minister, where is the $1 billion? What happened with the money? Where is the money? And he would look in the cameras and says, I don't know. Ask the Minister of Finance. So they went to the Minister of Finance and they asked him, Minister of Finance, um, what happened with the $1 billion? And he says, I don't know. Ask Mr. Christian. And
Oh.
they were doing this back and forth. To this day, $1 billion disappeared and was never to be found. And nothing was done to those politicians. They escaped pretty much with the murder. And they could do that with a smile on their face, and nothing was done to them. At that moment, I realized we've lost Canada. We have a dictatorship right now, not politicians. Yeah, we think we elect them, but it's all a scam, it's all a sham, it's all a joke. One party, this party, that party, it's a revolving door. They're just rotating. But we've lost democracy, we've lost our rights in this country. And from that moment on, I was observing more and more of our rights were stripped, more and more taxes were added. Those people could spend billions of dollars left and right, and Canadians were impoverished. They were attacked. Some were imprisoned,
Hmm.
and including me, for just speaking publicly, for just exercising my rights. So this is going on for a while, and started with Trudeau's father, and before him, and then now it's being continued with the son, Justin Trudeau. And it looks like Justin Trudeau is just finishing Canadians. He's finishing the job that his father started. He wants a total full dictatorship, a total government control on the people, including social networks, including finances. When you deposit a bigger amount of money, I'm being bigger, not big, $10,000, you know,
Yeah.
into the bank account, the banks, they have to send a notification to the federal government that you've deposited that amount of money. There is a total
Mm.
non-stop control of the government over your life, where you go, what you do. It's horrible. That's communism in
Yeah.
the making. We already have socialism. Now they're progressing into communism.
I believe it. And so I guess here's something I wanted to ask. I kind of did a little bit of research on this like several months ago because I was genuinely curious. We have this idea, a lot of us, I should say, a lot of us have this idea that socialism works. Look at the Nordic countries like the Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Norway. socialism works. Well, after doing some research, I realized that their economies are more capitalistic than not. So, why do we have this perception? Like, where does that come from?
It comes from the government itself and from the media. That's the problem, educational system. My son goes to school, and the first thing he hears is not the subject of his study. The professor at the university, he says, I am a socialist, and if you don't like it, there is the door. So they are pushing this lie on the young generation. They are lying to the people because, if you have not been living in Sweden or other countries, how would you know? You don't
Right.
know. And even as a tourist, when you go over there and you see something nice and, oh, yeah, this must be good because, wow, this is a nice country. So everything is good. No, it's not. I have people living in Iceland and other places, and it's horrible. It's
Mm,
horrible. They're controlled to the max. They're totally controlled nations, and its populations are completely controlled. It's chaos. The prison system is a mess. Uh, it's like when you're arrested over there, you are being sent to a paradise. You got everything your heart desire. So this type of system is not going to work for too long because it's destroying the hardworking people, and that's what we're going to see in the next few years. We'll see a total collapse of the economical system because they cannot sustain this charade for too long. They cannot just keep printing money over and over again and think, okay, somehow this is going to. It's like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, well, the money will balance itself. No, it
no.
won't.
Yeah.
Money will not balance itself.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you've heard. Right now there is this big talk about great reset.
Oh,
what
yes.
is what is great reset? They know they cannot keep doing what they're doing forever, that
Yeah.
the economical everything is on the verge of collapsing. They know that, so they need to rob you, they need to take from you, from the people, in order to pay for all the evil they have done. They kept printing money, they kept lying, they kept manipulating, and now it's biting them.
Yeah.
So they have to destroy the people in order to protect their dictatorship.
Yeah. And unfortunately, our prime minister is completely on board with that great reset. He's publicly proclaimed that. Um, it's really sad to hear, honestly. And, one of the things I remember being highlighted, it gives me shivers to think about it, but you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
figure
like,
that out.
yeah,
I
that's
would
just,
say, I would say to Prime Minister, I said, okay, if you will own nothing, you will be happy. Please give me your millions upon millions of dollars that you have right now, your castles and your palaces. The Prime Minister has an oil company in Saudi Arabia. Give up your oil company, give up those billions of dollars, your sport cars, and then maybe we can sit down and have a coffee and talk about it. But you see, the Great Reset, this is what it actually means. They will be richer, you will be poorer. That's the great reset they're talking about. They will have everything and you will have nothing.
right.
That's what they're saying. They're
Yeah.
not willing to give up anything. Show me one politician in this country, and all of them are saying we're in this together, that give up his salary like the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Right.
one.
Not one.
Not one. They still collect their money, even though they're not working right now. The parliament is shut down, the city councils are shut down, everything is shut down, but they're collecting their money every month and they get bonuses every month. They are not in this with us. We're not in this together. They
Right.
have more, you have less. How can we say we're in this together where the rest of the population is becoming a slave population, and though politicians that should work for us are working against us, impoverishing all of us? So it's a great reset according to them. So they will have more and you will have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a total control game.
It
Let
is.
me just let me
Yeah.
add this. How you control a population, how you control a free population, let me add this. You have to eliminate the middle class. You have to eliminate the middle class. Why the middle class? The middle class is a driving force for economy. The middle class are highly educated people, well traveled, they've been places. You can't fool them. They've seen things, they know things, they know history. They're hardworking people. Their businesses are from generation to generation. They're smart.
Yeah.
So they need to eliminate the middle class. The middle class people, if you take them off, they will hire a lawyer and they will fight the government. They want to stand up for their rights. And then you've got the small and middle sized businesses. You need to eliminate them. Why? Because they're the middle class people and they will fight you. If they see government doing something wrong, they will fight you. They will hire lawyers and they will take you to court. So, how you enslave a nation? Eliminate the middle class, small and medium businesses, and then you only have the extremely rich and powerful, and then you will have extremely poor. When you have poor people, they cannot fight you. They have to go to two jobs to just pay the mortgage so they can keep their house, so they can pay the bills, so they can have a bread on their, on their table.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot fight you. They cannot protest. They cannot do rallies. They're too busy surviving. And that's exactly what you're starting to see in Canada. People are too busy. They need to survive. They want to survive this craziness while the rich get more richer and the poor are getting poorer. And then the media, you need the media on your side. You need the media on your wagon because the media is sending the message. And the media is saying, stay home. We are in this together. Politicians love you while they are robbing you at the same time. You need the media, you need the military, you need the police, you need the political system to destroy a nation, to enslave a nation. When you look at Canada right now, you see exactly all of those different points working together against the people.
Mm-hmm. And so, in your personal experience, because you are a pastor, and the very thing that made me want to reach out to you, watching you on Rebel News, basically, you were being targeted for feeding the homeless and for preaching to people on the street. Like, I. I can't even figure that one out, but basically you're being targeted for that. And so this isn't your first run in, I guess, with trouble in that sense. So what have you personally experienced that have kind of mimicked what you experienced back in Poland?
Yeah, I work with the homeless people for the past 22 years. For the first few years, it was not public. It was just me trying to help them one on one. And then in 2002, I went to the streets and I started to help the homeless people where I could find them on the streets. In 2005, I walked away from my business realm and I started to do this full time. And that's where we started to see the media. We got their attention. They started to write stories about us. We were very successful. I took hundreds of people off the streets and we interfered with drug trafficking business. Someone was losing millions of dollars. Media got involved, politicians got involved. And then from a hero, I became literally from one day to another, I became a zero. I became the enemy of the state. I became this troublemaker, lawbreaker. I started to advocate for the poor. I started to speak on the radio, on TV, in newspapers, articles. I started to write about what I see, this takeover of communism and socialism. I started to be called, they called me street advocate because I started to advocate for the rights of the poor. I started to advocate for the people that are being attacked, abused, harassed by authorities, either police or bylaw officers or politics. I started to expose corruption in the shelters, corruption within the system. So just for your information,
Sure.
homelessness is a big business. We're talking about $230 million just in the province of Alberta to fight homelessness. $230 million every single year is being designated to fight homelessness. I started to ask questions. Where is the money? What happens with the money? How it's allocated? Why we have huge lineups of people starving, and yet I hear that you got millions upon millions of dollars to feed them. So what happens with the money?
Mhm.
Those were unacceptable questions by the government. So I started to have police showing up. I started to have bylaw officers showing up, crown prosecutors, minister of justice, you know, attorney general. I started to have premiers talking about us, mayors saying that we are wicked, evil people. And I started to be taken to courts. You see, my questions were very uncomfortable because the whole system is rotten. It's evil. It's a big, fat corruption. Give you a perspective. You got people on the streets, you got homeless people. How the government pays the shelters is per head, like cattle. So you are going to the shelter, and if it's 1,000 heads, then the 1,000 heads are being multiplied by so much more money the government is giving to the shelters. More heads, more money. More cattle, more money. Less cattle, less money. So they didn't like that I was so successful in taking people off the streets because they started to lose money. And I'm talking about millions of dollars. This is an industry that lots of people are profiting from. Homelessness is a big fat business, and I was interfering with their business. So how you get rid of someone that interferes with your business? You remove him, you destroy him, you take the credibility away from him. And that's exactly what started to happen. They started to write stories about me. They featured me every second day in the news, evening news. Art Pawlowski refuses to bow. Art Pawlowski refuses to stop feeding the poor. I'm their lawbreaker, troublemaker. They say, Art, why can't you just follow the rules? You're a rule breaker. And I said, listen, I'm here to save lives. And they are hungry. The shelters are not feeding them. There's abuse of power. The women are being raped in shelters. Their belongings confiscated. They are being tortured in shelters. And I know this is a very hard thing for you to hear because people don't know what's really going on. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, I have over 100 taped testimonies of women that were being raped, tortured, beaten, abused in the shelters in the city of Calgary. So I started to talk about it. And that was a no. So I faced the wrath of the government and the wrath of the political system and the media craziness. I was arrested multiple times. I faced over 100 court cases. I received over 300 tickets, and my name was completely destroyed by the mainstream media. However, I kept doing what I was called to do. I still feed the poor 4 times a week. I still preach the gospel. I restore people's hopes, and I try to take as many people as I can from the streets. I will not bow before the evil, rotten, corrupted government. I work for God, and God is telling me very simply, take care of the widows and the orphans, feed the poor. So I'm doing what I'm told to do, and they hate that. I remember many conversations I had with the politicians, and this is what they said to me. You know, your lineups, I have a big lineups of people waiting to receive necessities of life. And they said, your lineups do not look good. It shows that we have a problem in the city of Calgary. It shows that they're homeless here. And you are actually giving a black eye to our city. So instead of seeing what I'm doing as a good thing, they see what I'm doing as a bad thing.
They're
And
trying to
they're
cover up
fighting.
basically the issue that's
That's right. That's exactly what they're doing. Let's pretend there are no homeless people here. Let's put everything under the carpet, and let's just pretend those people are not here, and we are living in the best city on the planet Earth. But that's just not the truth. And again, socialism and communism, which we have in Canada right now, they hate the truth. They are detached from the reality. They hate the truth and they fight the truth at every corner, especially a truth that is coming from a clergyman. They
yeah.
hate religion, they hate God, they hate accountability, they hate an idea that one day they're going to face a judge that doesn't take bribes. God. They hate that idea and they're fighting that idea at every corner.
Right. Well, and the real enemy is an enemy that is unseen here. It's the devil.
Yeah, of course. You
Yeah.
know, they're the minions of the devil. They don't even realize that. And that's a sad thing because, you know, how many years as humans we have. We come, we live, and then we die, and then that's after that, that's eternity. And those people don't realize the life goes that
Yeah.
fast. It goes. And you can't take your money with you. You can't take your palaces with you. You can't take your oil company with you. You're going to face the living God, and you will be accountable for what you said and for what you did. They have their 5 minutes, and they want to capitalize on that. They want to use those 5 minutes to the max, and then they die. Where is Adolf Hitler today? Where is the Nazi party today? Where is the Stalin and Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels and all those wackos, those evil, wicked people? Where are they today?
Yeah. It's a very serious question that we all have to ask ourselves at some point in our life. Um, yeah, very sobering.
There is a scripture in the Bible that says, even if a man conquers the whole world but loses his own soul, he profits nothing. Because in the end of the day, eternity is a long time, and those few years on this side of eternity goes so fast. And people are losing their lives, they're wasting their lives pursuing something that they cannot take with them. It's like chasing the wind. You will be chasing that wind until the day you die, and it's over. I
Mhm.
used to be the one that was chasing the wind, but now I am chasing God because my reward will come from Him. I
So
want to hear one day, you
sorry,
know,
how did that happen? How did you go from one to the other?
well, I was a very selfish, arrogant, proudful buffoon. I I hated people. I hated the poor. I hated the homeless because I used to look at them as they're the bums. They're the losers. I would say, come on, put your life together and do something useful with your life. But it was a long process. I met this woman. Women got amazing power. I met this Christian woman, and she was telling me about God. She was telling me about Jesus. She was saying to me that there is a better way to live. It's a life of peace and hope and freedom. I was a slave. I was a drunkard. I was not good.
Mm.
And she was telling me about this God, and I rejected it over and over again. But I loved her. I married her. And then eventually she got through me. And we got son that was born in 1999. I remember I changed my entire life. I stopped drinking. I stopped doing bad things. I made peace with my wife and with everybody else. And in 2000, my son was born, our first child. And he was born with a heart on opposite side, smashed lungs. He was born dead. They brought him back to life. But that was a moment in my life that I realized that there are things more important than business, more important than money. There are certain things that I cannot buy. I cannot buy happiness. I cannot buy peace. I cannot buy freedom. I cannot buy those things. I cannot be a happy man just because I have money. And I cannot buy life. When my son was dying, I couldn't buy myself from this trouble. I couldn't just pay enough money to get out of this trouble. There was someone more powerful than money. And I realized that I need to make peace with him. And I did. It's a long story. You
Yeah.
can watch it. It's featured on a documentary on my life called Street Advocate. Street
Okay.
Advocate is on YouTube for free. You can watch it. So it takes me 1 hour and a half to tell the story. So I don't want to
I'll
take that
just
time.
I'll just link it here.
But that's what changed my life. It was a graduate process. My wife fought for me for 7 years until finally I took the knee before God. And then when my son was born, and the sickness and the trouble and the doctors that said he's not going to live, that we have to unplug him, that there is no hope whatsoever. That's where that was the moment in my life that I started to think outside of my sphere of money, business, clients, drinking. And I started to ask questions, what's really important. And I made my peace with God. I
Mm.
said, either my son lives or dies, I will serve you for the rest of my life. And nothing happened, no earthquake until the next day. When I went to the hospital, it turned out that my son was completely healed. They've called my son a star baby, a miracle baby, that they said, this is a miracle. This baby cannot breathe, but is breathing, cannot, should not live, but is alive. And called a symposium on doctors and declared that my son is a miracle
Wow.
from God, that God healed him. It was impossible for him to be alive, but he was alive. And you know, all of those different things, me stopping, you know, being an alcoholic, stopping doing all those different things and seeing that miracle, how powerful this God was. All the doctors, all the experts didn't give him any chance of survival. But when I made my peace with God, within a second, he heals my son. I have a surgeon's report, and it says that when they opened him up, there was not even a trace of the lung, and the heart was on the opposite side. They couldn't fix him. But the next day, he was breathing on his own, and the doctors were puzzled. They couldn't understand what happened. So when I saw that, I said, wow, I was missing in my life. I was missing rejecting God, rejecting his mercy, rejecting his love, rejecting his freedom
Mm.
all
Yeah.
my life, and I was missing so much. I want to serve him. I want to work for him. I finally have found a boss worthy to work for. And I said to him, God, do with me as you please. I'll work for you. I'll serve you for the rest of my life. And I started a church that is now known as Street Church, that feeds the homeless people. We have about 40 churches like this in different continents, different countries. And that's what I do. I feed the poor, I preach the gospel, I give people hope, and I advocate. That's what I do. I advocate for human rights. I speak against dictatorship, communism, socialism. I I do everything in my power to give people hope. If I can summarize what I do, that's what I do. I give people hope for a better tomorrow, and that hope comes from God.
Mm. Wow, what a testimony, Pastor Art. That is truly incredible. So on that same line of giving people hope and that hope coming from God, what kind of hope would you impart for Canadians today, given the situation that we're in right now? What encouragement and words of wisdom would you pass along to us?
You know, here's what I believe it's happening. Canada is a very unique country. It was established on Judeo-Christian values. The forefathers escaped Europe. If you know your history,
Yeah.
they escaped Europe because there was a heavy persecution in Europe. Protestants were persecuted, and they took off to this, they call it the New World. They came to North America. So I'm talking about Canada, and I'm talking about United States, the New World, a land without persecution, a land of freedom, a land that where we can come, work hard, and worship our God. So in, hundreds of years ago, forefathers decided to establish this nation, a nation without persecution. And they wanted to establish this nation on a Judeo-Christian values, on the Word of God. When you look at our parliament, the write-ups on the parliament building are quotes from the Bible,
Yeah.
from sea to sea, from Psalms, our national anthem, the preamble to our Constitution, Charter of Rights and Freedoms,
Hmm.
whereas Canada is founded on principles of God, right? The supremacy of God and the principle of law. Supremacy of God is established on supremacy of God. So there was this acknowledgement that God is the number one, is the most important person if you want to have a good and prosperous nation. And then the rule of law, because when you have God, you will have rule of law. And that's how our nation was established.
Hmm.
And our forefathers, the first forefathers of this, nation, they were Christians, and they were not hiding Christians. They wanted to establish a nation that was acknowledging God, a good nation that God would bless. And for the past 40, 50 years, what I see is Canadians and the government and the media and the educational system is doing everything in their power to remove that heritage from this nation. They want to remove God from this nation. They are God hostile. They hate God. They hate the concept of God. They hate the rule of law. They hate everything that God represents. And first, they removed the prayer from the schools. Then they removed the Bible from the schools. Then they removed 10 Commandments from the courthouses. They removed the definition of marriage and the protection for the unborn. They removed so much. They hate God and they remove Him at every corner, everywhere they can, ridiculing, laughing at the concept of law of God. And so what happened was we have become a secular society. We have become a society that says church is non-essential, but liquor store and marijuana store is essential. We have become a nation that shuts down churches but opens abortion clinics where you can freely murder the future generation of this country, the blessings of children. We have decided that churches are hateful and euthanasia is beneficial, where we can murder our elderly instead of honoring them for what they've done for the society. We murder them. We have decided to murder the disabled because we say they are non-beneficial to our society, that they are a burden to society. That's exactly what Adolf Hitler did. He murdered 250 disabled people in his country before the Second War started. So we see this repetition of history. When a society removes God, the God of blessings, what remains is the curse. So Canada, for a long time, has been cursed. This is a cursed nation. And you see the curses left and right. You see the attack on something that was decent and good. Just like the Bible says that there will come a time when they will call evil good and good evil. We are living in such a times. Canadians are calling evil good and good they call evil. So I'm telling you what is going to happen. God is shaking the whole earth. He is shaking the church. He's telling his church, wake up, wake up, come out of this craziness and do what I commanded you to do. Go out there, preach the gospel. Gospel is the good news. Feed the poor, take care of the orphans and the widows. Be the hands and the feet of Jesus. Be my hands, he says. Go out there where people are dying without hope. When you look at our society right now, there is absolutely no hope. You look at the media, and every single day you're bombarded with more various cases, with more viruses, with more sickness, with this and that, and economic collapse. You're being bombarded by the evil every single day. And people have no hope. That's why there's so many suicide cases right now. That's why people are depressed. That's why you have so many drunkards and people hooked on drugs. The fentanyl overdose by tens of thousands all across this nation is crazy, is out of hand. Why? Because the moment you turn your hearts and you look at something else or someone else than God as your savior, as your God, then you're going to be cursed. You know, fentanyl is not going to save you. A bottle of whiskey or vodka is not going to save you. You know, a can of beer is not going to save you. And if you continue murdering your children and murdering your elderly and your disabled, you have effectively turned yourself into a wicked, evil society that doesn't value life. I call it the culture of death. And that's what we see. We have a culture of death, and death will follow you wherever you go. So my message to Canada and any other nation, if you want your blessings back, turn back to God, repent, go to your knees, even if you don't understand, go to your knees and just lift your hands up and say, God, I may not understand you, I may not know who you are, but forgive me for all the things that I have done against you. Help me, restore me, give me hope, give me future, give me freedom, restore love into my heart, that I can be a good man, that I can do and pursue good, not evil. Canada and Canadian governments, the whole society needs to go back to God and cry out to God. We need repentance in this land. We need revival in this land. We need the clergymen to go and do what the clergymen are supposed to be doing, which is preaching the whole truth and nothing but the truth, even if it's not popular. We need to, as a church, go back to the society, not just build monuments for ourselves, churches, cathedrals, but go where the people are. Spend time with the people, help people, let them know that God is not interested in religion.
Yeah.
He's interested in relationship with people. People don't like religion because religion manipulates, religion steals, religion controls.
Yeah.
But God is not interested in controlling you. He's interested in releasing you. He wants to set you free. The Bible says, who comes to me is free indeed. Who comes to Jesus Christ of Nazareth is free indeed. He wants to give you freedom and future and hope. He wants to restore your country. But it will happen only through repentance. We have to come to God and say, God, we blew it. We walked away from you. Look at us today. We are in a big trouble, God. Help us. That's what Canadians need. And I'm telling you, I guarantee you, if Canadians will do that, God is going to listen from heaven. It says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and turn away from their wicked ways, we have to come to a point that we have to realize we blew it. We turned the churches into something that God never wanted us to have. Buildings. Church is not the building.
No, it's not.
You cannot put God in a building and tell him, you sit and you listen to me. No, God is God. He's sitting on the throne. So if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and turn away from their wicked ways and call upon me, we need to call to God. We need to humble ourselves and say, God, forgive us for what we have done. Then it says, then I will hear from heaven. He will answer you when you come to him with a humble heart. And then he says, then I will heal their land. Canada needs healing. This land needs to be healed. Our hearts need to be healed. The political system, economical system, the educational system, the media, the courts, all of those systems, they need to be healed. And only God can heal this cancer. We have a cancer in the land, and the cancer is deadly. It's going to kill this nation unless we cry out to God and say, God, please heal our land. Cut the cancer out. Please. We beg you. We want to come back to you. When you do that, God is going to restore the blessings of this nation.
Wow. Amen. Yes, I agree with you, Pastor Art. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and for sharing your perspective, your experience in Poland, for educating us on the difference between socialism and communism, how they're similar, how they're different. And for sharing your testimony. So thank you so much. I hope this blesses many people.
Let me finish with this.
Sure.
When you see evil in your land, when you see evil creeping in, there's only one solution to stopping the evil. You have to rise up. You have to stand up. You have to be vocal. You have to be visible. You have to go. You cannot just sit and pretend it's not happening or wait for God to do something. I remember he said to me many years ago, the greatest tragedy for man is that the man is waiting for me. And at the same time, I am waiting for men. God has given us everything. He has given us his name, his word, his blessings, his protection. The only thing he wants us to do is go. Go out there, be among the people, preach the truth, set the captives free. Evil will not stop on its own. Evil needs to be stopped. Darkness will not disappear unless you bring the light. So I'm telling you, Canadians, rise up and be the light in the darkness. Be the salt out there in this world. Because if the salt loses its saltiness, will be useless and will be trampled by men. Now the church has been trampled by the government, by the educational system, by the media. It's time for the salt to be salty again. It's time for the light to shine brightly. Be that light, be that salt, be blessed, and go out there and conquer your land that God has given it to you, the promised land. Conquer it for His truth.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you like this episode, make sure you give it a thumbs up and follow Immigrants of Canada on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Instagram. Immigrants of Canada is financially supported by wonderful people like you. If you feel led to contribute financially, please visit www.immigrantofcanada.com/donate, or you can visit my page on Patreon, and for $5 a month, you can support Immigrants of Canada. I'll leave those links in the description box below. And until then, we'll see you in the next episode.